Eagles win this game 20-16. They were able to get a massive conversion with A.J. Brown to kind of round this one out in this game. It was closer than I thought it was going to be. I'm not going to lie. But let's take a look at the Eagles' top 5 graded players before we get into the stats that really told the story of this one. A.J. Brown is at the very top of the list for the Philadelphia Eagles with a 91.3 overall grade. We got a pair of defensive tackles, Jordan Davis, 83.6, and then Jalen Carter, 81.5. Linebacker Nolan Smith, 3 straight Georgia players. Boom. Look at that. 77.8. And then number 5, offensive tackle Jordan Mailata with a 75.8. Jalen Hurts in this one, a 73.0. On Cleveland side of things, surprise, surprise, Myles Garrett at the very top of the list with an 86.4. Tight end David Njoku with a 79.0. Safety Rodney McLeod with a 77.8. Linebacker Mohamed Diabate with a 77.7. And then linebacker Devin Bush with a 75.9. Quarterback Deshaun Watson in this one continues to struggle this season, 51.5. Dalton, stats that told the story. What do we got?
So the Eagles' offense just doesn't look totally right, does it? Like I just think it feels
Depends
like
which plays you look at.
It feels, and that's my point.
Right.
It's my exact
Right.
point right there. Is
Right.
It feels like the drives where they get some big explosive play, they go down and score. And then there's other drives. It kind of feels like all or nothing right now, doesn't it? Right. And I've got here's what I have. They ran for 116 yards on the day. Right. 3 of them accounted for 42 of those yards. That means their other 33 carries, they had 74 yards. It's a grind right now, okay? The passing game, 7 explosive pass plays, which is cool. That's great, especially against what's supposed to be a pretty good defense in the Browns.
7 explosive pass plays. It's cool.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty cool.
That accounts for close to 80% of their passing yardage. It just feels like right now it's a bunch of 1 yards, 3 yards, 2 yards, kind of just inching by until they can just pop one of those explosives because the defense made a mistake or A.J. Brown just makes a great play, right? Like there's not a consistent flow to this offense right now. And these look, especially the 7 explosive passes, yeah, it's the reason they won the game. I won't lie. Like it's cool to get 7 explosives, but there's the periods in between are really rough right now. I mean, I'm talking it really feels like it's just 2 yards at a time, 3 yards at a time, until they just can, okay, A.J. Brown, here's a go ball. Or the winning touchdown to Devontae Smith till somebody just busts a coverage and he can walk from 50 yards in, right? I mean, it's just kind of, it's choppy. It feels like, it doesn't feel like, yeah, it feels like, okay, some people would look at it in the optimist sense and go, yeah, the Eagles are very explosive. Because they are, with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith healthy, and usually with Saquon Barkley being better than he was in this game, they are explosive. But it feels inconsistent. It feels like they could have scored more points than this. If it's just the in-between plays right now in kind of the normal settings that I don't really think they're getting it done consistently. You know what I didn't know till this morning either? Do you know they have not scored a point in the first quarter this year?
The Eagles?
In 5
haven't
games,
scored a point?
5 first quarters, they have not scored a single point.
Wow.
I mean, it's hard to live. I mean, this is the Browns, so you knew it's like, and the Browns, they just couldn't score. The only touchdown was on a blocked field goal. Eventually, the dam's going to break open, and they're going to make a mistake, and Devontae Smith will be wide open for some reason, and he'll walk into the end zone.
It did kind of feel that way against the Saints, though, too. Remember that game where it was like,
eventually,
at the end of the game, clock hit 0, and the Eagles were up on top of the scoreboard, and we were like, oh.
Outside of in that game, outside of 2 or 3 explosive plays, a couple from Goddard, the one big run from Barkley, wasn't a whole lot going on.
Right.
And it was kind of the same feeling. If the Browns were capable of scoring, I think we might have seen them win this game because the Eagles, it feels like their offense right now when you watch it in sequence is we're just waiting for a home run. You're just waiting for it. It's the guy that hits 190 and hits 40 home runs a year. It's Adam Dunn or something like that, Cincinnati legend. It's something like that where it's like you're just waiting for it.
Yeah.
And you really the problem is sometimes those guys you're waiting like 3, 4, 5 days for it. Mm-hmm. If they're going cold, if you're going long stretches of these games where every play is going for 2 yards, like I know there's a lot of frustration in Philly right now, but I kind of get it. Because it's not consistent at all. You got 2 A.J. Brown go balls that were great. Devontae had the busted coverage he took for a touchdown. Grant Calcaterra had 1 busted coverage that he took for 40 yards. Like waiting for other teams' mistakes to make big plays. kind of a dangerous way to live if you're not doing the things that you need to do on the rest of the plays, of the other 80 to 90% of plays.
Walt in the chat is saying that the Eagles should give 6'8" Harold Carmichael more targets, who played in the 70s, I think. He played with the 70s with the Eagles, which is funny because I know that Walt is kind of trying to flex the history knowledge that he had there. But they do actually have Johnny Wilson on the roster.
It's close enough.
So it's close enough. So, Walt, you might have lucked into being right there.
Maybe a tall person will help.
Look, my stat that told the story, we've talked a lot about the Browns and specifically Deshaun Watson, I think, through the first 5, now 6 weeks of the season. And I think it's a little bit of a, like, there's not a lot new here with Deshaun Watson. He's bad. Like, it's no matter how many times we say it, no matter how many times we, like, cite the stats, the sacks taken, the EPA when he's out there with the offense, the lack of creativity that they have on third down, the lack of ability to move the sticks on third down, how much he is holding the ball and they expect from him and he's not giving them a return. Like, whatever you want to look at, we talked about it over the last 5 to 6 weeks. Deshaun Watson has not been good. The actual stat that tells the story here for me is that this team's not supposed to have to ask Deshaun Watson to be Superman. They're supposed to have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. They have over the last 5 years, but because of age and a little bit of changes, but more importantly, injuries this year, Dalton, I don't know if you realize this unit's not just, okay, the Browns' offensive line, they're not what they used to be. They're bad. They're really bad. In fact, the only offensive line in the NFL that has a worse overall blocking grade through 6 weeks is the Patriots, which we talk about being a quarterback wasteland. And we'll get to Drake May in a second because we're talking about that game next. But the Browns are next. They're 31st in the NFL, 53.4 blocking grade. They're tied for the most sacks allowed on third down with 12, and tied for the most sacks allowed on third down when credited just to the offensive line. So you take quarterback, sacks out of the equation. They're worst in the league in both of those categories. Again, the only team that they're tied with are the Patriots. The Browns are just as bad. Injuries to Jack Conklin, injuries to Ethan Posick, injuries to Wyatt Teller. Jedrick Wills coming back and not being as good as he has looked at the early parts of his career. Like, all of this goes into the fact that not only is Deshaun not great, they're asking him to be good behind a terrible offensive line right now. So, yeah, I mean, we could sit here and talk about how I think they should go to Jameis. Like, because Jameis is clearly, I think, would give them a spark that Deshaun's not giving them. But really, the root of a lot of this stuff is the offensive line.
I don't think it matters what quarterback's in there.
It doesn't. And I think part of me feels as though the Browns they're not benching Deshaun because they owe him like $200 million still. Like, we know why they're not benching Deshaun Watson. But part of me feels as though the decision makers who would even suggest that are waiting for, one, Nick Chubb to come back and somehow look. I mean, if he looks like the Nick Chubb that we have seen after that knee injury we saw last year, it's just a mind-blowingly incredible accomplishment from Nick Chubb, if that is even close to being possible. So they're waiting for Nick Chubb to come back, I think. And then I think they're waiting for Jack Conklin and Wyatt Teller to come back, because somehow they think that when all three of those guys get back there, the offense is just going to be fixed. And Deshaun will be fine, and they'll be good to go, and he could be the starter. But I just had to go on a little bit of a rant there, because we love to talk about how bad Deshaun Watson is, and he has not been good. But this Browns offensive line is not just not what they used to be. They're terrible this season. So I don't know how much is getting better no matter what.
It's an older roster, and when you throw injuries in there, you start to look at this more of a long-term, team-wide problem. Yeah, I don't know. Look, Nick Chubb, if he comes back and he's great, fantastic. It'll certainly help. I don't think it matters what quarterback's in there. I think if it was Joe Flacco, if it was Jameis Winston, if it's Watson, I think it's pretty clear that the Browns they can't function on offense.
Nope.
And it's not giving them a chance to win. And their defense, honestly, it's not playing like an elite defense. It's still good. Obviously, anytime you have Myles Garrett, you have a chance. Block the field goal in this game that got returned for a touchdown. But
right.
Offensively, they give themselves no shot to win it all. Their offense had 6 points in this game. So It's just kind of the way it's been, and it is more than just the quarterback, even though the quarterback is still arguably the biggest problem. Most impressive for me, just on the other side of that, Eagles' defensive line did dominate the way they should. 6 of their 7 highest graded defensive players were up front. Jalen Carter, Josh Sweat, Nolan Smith, Milton Williams, Jordan Davis, you name it. Pretty much every Eagles defensive lineman had a good game in this one. They totaled 18 pressures as a unit, 4 sacks. Watson was under pressure on half his dropbacks. Like you just mentioned, the offensive line issues, and their defensive line, a 73% pass rush win rate. Just dominant across the board, and for that exact reason.
My most impressive was A.J. Brown. We already kind of talked about him, what he meant to this team. 9 targets, 6 catches, 116 yards. Had that big touchdown, and then sort of that vintage, like, hey, we need somebody to go make a play for us. Throw it to A.J. Brown. He does that box-out catch better than it feels like anybody in the NFL. So he was my most impressive. Most disappointing for me was the Eagles' run game. It goes a little bit into what you were talking about with the inconsistencies of the offensive side of things. Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts, both below 2.7 yards per carry in this game. That, to me, should be the Eagles' identity. Like, if you want to play, shot put game in the passing game, fine, but like you got to be running the ball a lot better than what they certainly did in this game. So I don't want to take anything away from Cleveland, probably limiting them from being able to do that, but that was the disappointing part. Most disappointing for you before we move on.
The other side of Brown there, the Browns run a ton of man coverage, and you need your corners to hold up, and they didn't hold up in this game. Denzel Ward, a 46 coverage grade. Martin Emerson, a 59.8. Greg Newsome, a 27.1. They combined to give up 11 catches for 191 yards.
Sean's asking who the bottom 5 graded offensive lines are 6 weeks through the season. The Raiders are 28 at 62.2. The Titans are 29 at 61.8. The Rams are 30th at 57.1. The Browns, they're at 31 at a 53.4. And then the New England Patriots are last in the NFL at a 51.
If I was going to guess 5, that's about right there.